out with the old and in with the new. Start your new year with Yahoo Small Business, with everything you need to start and grow your business. Find a domain, get a business email, and create a new professional website. Have a business idea and don't know where to start? Visit www.yahoosmallbusiness.com.
Welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast, where I, Keisha Nicole, delivers a daily dose of passion, purpose, and struggle by interviewing people who are living their best life doing what they love. Here on this podcast, every Oh Hell No moment serves a purpose. Now let's get started with the show. Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today, I have Justin Pogue. He is a rental secrets strategist. I love this. He has a book called Rental Secrets: Reduce Your Rent, Get Better Value, Create Quality Communities. Welcome to the podcast, Justin. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Keisha. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, this is going to be so much fun. So tell me, when you were growing up, what did you think you would do as an adult for work?
Well, it certainly wasn't this. So when I was growing up, kind of started out with the usual suspects, astronaut, firefighter, those kinds of things. But when I got into high school, I really kind of started to key in on going into the field of business, because my concept was I wanted to get in a role where I could impact as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. And I saw that, everybody was out either going to retail stores and buying things, or they were doing business. Business was a major part of their life in many different ways, and it touched on many aspects of their life. So that's where I kind of keyed in on business, but I didn't really know what specific kind or type of business that I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to learn about it. So that's actually what I went ahead and studied in college.
So when you got out of college, tell us a little bit about your experiences. Like, what was your worst position?
So when I was leaving college, I had the option of two different jobs. One was working for an accounting company, and the other was working for a private physical security company. And the accounting thing, like, you're sitting behind, my impression of it was you're sitting behind a desk, you're dealing with paper all day, counting money that other people had already made, which didn't really appeal to me very much. So I ended up taking the job managing private security officers. So I ended up managing 80 people spread across 17 different corporate sites, and all of the drama that sounds like it entails, it most certainly entailed.
Oh, God. I can just imagine. I'm a project manager, so, oh, geez.
Yeah. And it's not just the personalities of the people who were working for me. It was also all the personalities of the clients that we reported to. And some of the clients that we reported to were the ones that actually held responsibility for the security role. And some of them were just other employees who liked sticking their nose into the security process, and creating lots of drama at their own companies. So let's just say there was never a dull day.
Right. Oh my gosh. So what was the breaking point for you where you're like, okay, I need to get out of this? And when you got out of it, was that your entry into real estate, or were there other experiences before you got into real estate?
So I did that job with a security company for 3 years. And I should have known how it was going to be, because on the first day they handed me a cell phone and a pager. So it was basically 24/7 kind of nonstop, was the kind of position that it was. So after 3 years, I decided, look, I'm going to go back to graduate school. I'm going to get my MBA. I'm going to reinvent myself. And we're going to take this experience for what it was. We'll take all the good stuff from it, and we're going to use that in our next role. So my plan was actually to become a management consultant. So that was my next step. I went to graduate school, found somebody to kind of guide me through the interview process and do mock interviews with. Found a company that I wanted to work for. Did the interview, landed the internship. So I'm thinking, great, I'm on my way. My plan is working. Everything's going great. Unfortunately, my timing was horrible, about as horrible as it could possibly have been. So this is around 2001. The dot-com bubble is imploding, and the whole management consulting industry is imploding right along with it. Mm. So my 12 weeks of internship got cut to 6, and people that they had already hired, they were sending rescission letters to, as in, thank you very much for buying a house near our office. We no longer need your services.
Oh my gosh.
So it was an incredibly poor time to try and enter the management consulting field. So I just kind of felt, life just took my little plan and, crumpled it up and threw it on the trash heap. And now I have to reinvent myself yet again. But as a lot of your listeners know, when one door opens, another one, and when one door closes, another one opens up. So while I'm trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, it turns out that my mother, of all people, who had been a real estate agent like 40 years prior, back in the late 70s and 80s, she was just learning about how you can acquire property by paying the back taxes owed on a particular piece of property. So what we did was, we were living in California at the time, and we took a road trip down to Florida. And we went and visited each of the county recorder's offices, because in that office is a list of properties that the counties tried to auction off the back taxes for each of those properties, and nobody bought them. And in Florida, if you buy 3 years of back taxes, you can pay those, jump through some hoops, and actually get legal title to a piece of property. So we went through that process with 3 properties, got control of them, and then ultimately sold them to developers. And that was how I began in real estate.
So stop right there. How expensive? Give us a range of what it costs to pay like back taxes on some of these properties.
Okay. Typically for the properties on that list, they're vacant land. And you want to be careful about which types of land that you get into, because you don't want to, say, buy a piece of land that's 5 feet wide and 100 feet long that you can't build anything on, and it's not really useful for you. So you need to know specifically what that piece of land is. But in terms of dollar amount, it can range anywhere from $5,000, $15,000. It really depends on where the property is and what those taxes were that were on the property. But all of that's on the list. The list will tell you what the back taxes are and what needs to be paid.
Wow. Okay. So now mom steps in, she's got a plan, you tag along and find that, I like this. This is interesting.
Yeah.
So this puts you into real estate. So after you get the 3 properties and you sell them to developers, what is your next step?
So our next step is, great, we went through this process, we got control of these properties, we sold them to developers, but that doesn't create any ongoing cash flow. Mm-hmm. So that's when we started looking at owning multifamily properties. Duplexes, fourplexes, apartment buildings, that kind of thing. So the next actual step we took was to purchase 2 duplexes, and they were 3-bedroom, 2-bath each side, in a small town in Georgia called Fort Valley. There's a university there called Fort Valley State University, and what we did was we started renting rooms to students at the university, because students like to live off campus. They like to not have a meal plan if they don't have to. So they're just looking for that freedom that they can get living off campus, especially once they get to the junior, senior years of their college experience. So that was the next step in real estate, and actually creating that residual cash flow opportunity for ourselves.
Wow. Okay. So what do you love about the business of real estate?
Real estate is this amazing, like, people relationship business. It's very much about you have a property for rent, someone comes to look at it, and you're, from that very first moment, you're building that relationship with them, you're building that rapport with them to see if this is a solution that will work for them. But in addition to that, it offers a lot of opportunities that most investments don't offer. So let's say, for example, you buy a stock. It doesn't matter what company it is. And that company makes a purchase that you don't agree with. Let's say they buy a 747 for their company president to fly around in. You have no influence on that decision. You can't call up the president of the company and say, hey, look, you bought that plane. I don't really think that was the best use of capital. I'd like you to take that back. They're not even going to take your call. But with real estate, you have pretty much total control over what your product is going to be and what your purchases are going to be. You can design the layout. You can design the layout of the building. You can decide what colors the room needs to be painted. What appliances need to go into this building? Can you get away with white appliances, or do you need stainless steel? You can decide whether you want it to be a regular bathroom, or do you want it to be a Jack and Jill bathroom with connected to bedrooms on either side. All of those decisions are at your disposal as the investor in that property, and it's a level of control that you don't necessarily have if you bought a stock or a bond.
So what are some of your pain points in investing and property management? Because you've done both, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
So tell us some of the things that keep you up at night or just drive you insane about the business.
So before we did our first investment, we had gone to seminars, we had read books, we had done all this research and due diligence, and those butterflies that you have in your stomach, they, before you make that first investment, don't actually go away until after you sign all the paperwork. Which I think most first-time investors don't understand. Like, you're still going to feel uneasy about this, no matter how many books you've read, no matter how many seminars you've gone to, no matter how many gurus you've listened to. It's still your first time investing in property, and those butterflies won't go away until you actually pull the trigger. In terms of pain points and things that property investors really look out for, is number one is the quality of your resident. As far as multifamily property is concerned, you want to find people to rent your property to who will follow the community rules, and not be loud at 3 a.m. in the morning and wake up their neighbors and clean up after their pets and pay their rent on time. And you want to find those residents that are easy to work with. That can be one of the pain points, because trying to get a resident out who's not easy to work with can be really difficult and expensive. The other thing is, and I've actually dealt with this with a lot of the properties that we were in, we were buying properties in areas that I didn't live, I hadn't been in before. So then you have to figure out, well, who are my vendors going to be? Who's going to be mowing my lawn? Who's going to come by and clean the properties when I need to do a turnover between tenants? Who do I need to talk to at the utility company? Who's good to work with in this particular locality? So there's a process that I had to go through to learn who those people were and to find those quality vendors who would help keep my property in the best shape for my residents. So those are a couple of pain points that you have as an investor, especially as an out-of-state investor.
Yeah, that's a good one. The last one you just brought up. So tell us, what is the biggest misconception, according to you, from your standpoint, about real estate investing and property management? Because I think a lot of people hear all these gurus, they read all these books, and they go to all these seminars, and sometimes they leave feeling like, oh, I could do this. This is going to be great. I'm going to be rich. So what would you say is the biggest misconception about investing and property management?
When people go to these seminars and run by these various gurus, they talk about all the benefits of owning property. They talk about the cash flow. They talk about property appreciation. They talk about the tax benefits. They talk about all those things. Very rarely do they actually talk about the brass tacks of property management. You're buying a property. This is not a stock. This is not a bond. Like a bond, you buy it, you sit on it, it pays you interest. You have to do nothing on a regular basis to make that happen. Real estate is not that. The property actually has to be operated. You have to check in with the residents every once in a while. They're going to call you with problems or issues that they may be having. At some point, some of them are going to move out, and you're going to have to find another person to move, or another family to move into that property. There are operational things that need to be done on a regular basis. And the seminars and the gurus don't really cover that part. They just assume you'll have professionals to help you with that. Maybe you will, and maybe you won't. But by that point, the gurus are long gone, offering their seminar in the next city down the road. So that's one really big misconception that I think a lot of people have. And I think a lot of it is just a function of the people that are out there teaching this stuff. They're focusing on all the for lack of a better word, they're focusing on all the sexy stuff, but they're not focusing on the real effort that needs to go into making this happen. And that being said, don't get me wrong, real estate is a fantastic way to build wealth and opportunity for yourself and your family over time. But there are some realities that people need to be aware of prior to getting involved in that.
What are 3 skill sets do you think someone should have when going into this type of business?
If you're going to buy a property, especially if you're going to manage it yourself, well, whether you're going to manage it yourself or not, people skills are incredibly, incredibly important. We've already kind of touched on the relationship that people should have with the residents or people that they're actually renting to. But other relationships are important too. The relationships that you're going to have with your vendors, if you actually hire a property management company. Actually, there's a good story about that. Specifically related to relationships. So I was managing a 32-unit apartment building that we had kind of bought later on. And we experienced a flood. And I mean, like, I'm standing on the second story of the building watching the flood water rise. And we've got 3-4 inches of water inside all of the apartments on the first floor. And I had never been through a flood before. So I called a flood abatement kind of company, and they said, well, yeah, we can help you. It'll be $2,000 per apartment. Well, there were 16 apartments. So I didn't have $32,000 just sitting around in an account somewhere to pay them. So I ended up calling my carpet cleaning vendor. And even though a number of properties had been affected that night, and this is well after hours, they took my call. Just the fact that they took my call and were willing to answer my questions in that moment was huge. And they would not have taken my call if I did not have a good relationship with that particular vendor. So relationships are absolutely paramount. The second skill I think people need to have is attention to detail. When you're looking for a property to buy and you're taking that tour, you're looking for things that might be wrong that you may have to correct should you choose to buy this property? How old are the appliances? And not just the ones in the kitchen, but the water heater, the air conditioner. How old are those? Is the property on a septic tank, or is it connected to a city sewer? Is there an opportunity for the property to be subdivided? Maybe it's on a large lot, so maybe half of the lot could be sold to either to defray the cost of your purchase, or maybe that other lot can be built on in the future, going somewhere down the road. And one of the other tricks that people who are selling properties like to do is they like to paint the property when they get ready to sell it. Paint can cover up a whole lot of things that you will be responsible for repairing when you buy it. So the attention to detail comes in when you're looking for those things that is this paint job just to pretty it up, or is this paint job actually covering things? And that's where the attention to detail can really save you some money in terms of your investment. Because if there are things wrong with the property prior to your purchase, those become negotiating points related to the purchase price. But once you sign on the dotted line and the property's yours, it's yours. Good, bad, and ugly.
Okay. All right. I like those. So now I want to ask you about your book, Rental Secrets, Reduce Your Rent, Get Better Value, Create Quality Communities. I love this because I've never seen anyone talk about helping renters, right?
Yeah.
So what gave you the idea to write this book?
So I was in a period in my life where I just left a property management company, and I was, again, trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I'm sitting in the bookstore and I'm looking at the real estate section, and I see books for owners, managers, and investors. But I didn't see any books for renters. And I'm like, okay, so somebody is being left out of this whole equation. And the group that's being left out is the group that is the foundation for the entire industry. I mean, when you think about it, renters are 43 million people. Actually, there are 43 million rental households across the US, bringing $500 billion with a T dollars to the residential rental industry every year.
Wow.
And nobody's talking to them. And it's crazy to me because you can get help, you can get advice on buying a car, a refrigerator, a computer, and relatively speaking, all of those purchases are really small potatoes compared to what people are paying in rent every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it also contributes to rent. Well, let me back up. There tends to be a very poor relationship between renters and landlords. And if you watch any of the judge shows on television and it's a landlord-tenant dispute, there are going to be fireworks, knock down, drag out fireworks. And what contributes to this poor relationship is, in many ways, a lack of education on the part of renters, but also on the part of landlords too. So we're still around the central concept of the relationship between the renter and landlord being absolutely key. And the book talks about how it's key to the renter getting a quality rental experience. But it's also key to the landlord getting out of their investment what they're hoping to get out of it as well. So that's where the book came from. And that's why I felt kind of compelled to write the book from the renter perspective, because the landlords have seminars and all these other things going on. The renters have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And since they're the ones that form the foundation for the whole industry, I thought it was really important to actually speak to them so that they could learn how to work better with landlords and how to realize savings in their biggest monthly expense by learning how to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's a great concept and idea. And I think that renters do need to learn how to protect themselves and make these deals a little bit better. So I want to cover 3 areas. So take control of lease and renewal conversations. Share 4 tips with us on how to do this and what can be accomplished by using each tip. So high level, of course.
Well, the first thing is to recognize that you actually can negotiate. The price for rent that is advertised is not, it's not like a price that you see on the shelf in Walmart. It is negotiable. Because each of these landlords, they have their own problems and issues and concerns going on behind the scenes. And they may actually be willing to accept an offer that you make. And there's a number of reasons why negotiation is possible. But the first and very most important reason is the nature of what the landlord has to offer. So they're offering you space in exchange for money, but it's also a time-based service. If that apartment that they have available is vacant for the whole day today, they don't make any money on that apartment. And it gets worse because they have no way to get that money back. It's gone forever. So there's this bias towards action, as I call it, that landlords have in trying to get these properties rented as quickly as possible. So that's 2 of the things that people need to keep in mind. Number 1 is the fact that they can negotiate, and 2, this vacancy issue is huge for landlords because if they don't rent it, they can't get that money back. It's gone forever. On top of that, you want to talk to the landlord in their language. So what are they looking at? They're looking at the competing properties that are around their property. Well, talk to them from the standpoint of what other deals are people offering right now. And you can tell them, look, I like your property. It fits well with where I need to be and the things I need to do. But these other properties are giving me this opportunity where I can save X dollars, or they're offering a decreased deposit for me to move in. Can you match that? They may very well match that, or they may very well start move their price in that direction as a way to entice you to rent their property. And all of these little tips and tricks and secrets are really important because, especially right now, landlords are really starting to realize that their relationship with their resident is absolutely critical to them getting money out of their investment. It is absolutely critical. So now is really a good time to be out there actually negotiating with landlords, speaking to them in their language, and also understanding that the pressures that they're under, because they are in serious competition. When people think about competition around renting, they think, oh, I'm competing against other renters. And that is true to some extent, but the landlord is also competing against other properties that are also looking for qualified renters. So there's multiple levels of competition going on, and recognizing that your landlord is in competition and speaking to that concern of theirs can help you get an apartment for lower rent.
Okay. All right. So let's go to use effective rent reduction strategies. Can you share some tips on how you can use these effective rent reduction strategies?
Yeah. So if you're in an apartment, they'll send you a renewal notice every year, and they'll say, we want to increase your rent by $250. Well, understand that one of the pressures that the landlord is under is, if you decide to move out, they have to pay someone to come in and clean the apartment. They're looking at some period of vacancy related to you moving out. They also may end up having to pay one of the online apartment companies, apartment search companies, to find them their new resident. So there are fees that landlords have to pay that are attached to those sites. All of these things are costs, and they're costs that are going to happen the landlord has no control over whether they pay those costs or not once someone decides to move out. But what they do have control over is that conversation between you and the landlord about, well, let's talk about this $250 a month increase that you're proposing. Knowing that you have all these costs that you're going to have to pay should I choose to move out, can we agree to something that's more reasonable? So that $250 a month increase may end up being $50 a month. It may end up being $75 a month. So, but it kind of gets back to speaking to them in their language and knowing what their pain points are.
So when they come to you with this whole yearly, or I don't know, every other year or whatever increase, that's not something that is stipulated by anything other than them just saying, well, I think we're going to raise the rent this year because we just want to make more of a profit. It's like a personal decision. It's not like coming from any board or anything like that.
Typically not. What they're doing is they have a process by which they, like, for example, they'll pull out a map, okay, and they'll stick a pen in their property, and then they'll draw a circle around that pen that's maybe a mile to a mile and a half out. And then they'll look inside that circle and see what other properties they think are competitors to their property. And they'll see what those properties are charging. That's what kind of guides their decision on increasing rents and that kind of thing. Mm. But that process really has nothing to do with you. Like they're not basing it on the fact that this job is that this apartment is 5 miles away from your job and it's close to your babysitter, and all of the reasons that you chose it are not involved in their calculus at all. Mm. So something I tell people is, let's say you chose this job this apartment because it was, 5 miles east of your job. Okay. Go look and see what apartments are 5 miles west of your job and see what those properties look like and what those rents are. Now, of course, you're choosing properties that you might consider living in and seeing what those rents are. And then when you have that renewal conversation, you can go back to them and say, well, I really would like to stay here. I mean, it's convenient for me. I like the community. I like my neighbors, but these are the other rental opportunities that I'm seeing out there on the market. And, can you match what they're doing? And chances are they probably won't match, but they will at least move in that direction. Because it's not just you coming into the office and whining about having to pay more rent. You're bringing them information about their competitors that they probably don't have, because these competitors are not inside that circle that they drew on that map.
That's smart. So what about when you sign a lease that states that every year there's a rent increase of X amount of percentage? Some of those buildings have that.
I would be very leery of signing a lease that's written that way, unless the rent that you're starting at is already below market.
Okay.
Because I'm like as we're seeing right now, the rental market has changed in a drastic way. Mm-hmm. And being locked into a lease like that is pretty difficult. And typically leases like that are more leases for retail space in malls or commercial space, that kind of thing. It's typically not a residential situation, because residential leases are typically about a year long, which gives, after the year's up, it gives both sides an opportunity to decide whether they want to continue this relationship or not.
Right. But I remember living in this building and they had they said that they raised the rent every year. I can't remember if they put the percent. I think they put a percentage range of how much they go up every year. And sure enough, they did. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. It just makes no sense. I think it was
Yeah.
like, 5% or something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah. If you're in a, and I'm assuming that you had an opportunity every year to decide whether you wanted to take
Yes.
increase or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're in that situation where there's an increase kind of locked in, should you decide to stay, then it becomes even more important to be aware of what's going on out there in the rental marketplace and what are the competitors to this building doing, and does it make sense for me to stay here or not? So that, I mean, it just becomes that much more important for you as a resident to have an idea of what's going on in the marketplace, what other options do I have, and how do I need to be approaching my situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So with COVID and so many people being laid off and facing a lot of financial struggles, what advice can you give to people about negotiating, rental renewals or just, figuring out how to talk to their landlords about not having all of the money that they need to pay their rent or whatever their situations are?
Okay. So absolutely. First off is figure out as best you can what your situation is, what dollars are coming in, whether it's unemployment or some severance from your previous job, um, or the federal stimulus support money that came in. Just figure out what resources that you actually have that you're working with, and do that prior to having a conversation with your landlord. Even if you are still working, I still recommend that people have conversations with their landlord about specifically how much they can pay and when. Because one of the real difficulties from a landlord standpoint is not only are people not paying, but I have no insight into their situation. All I have is what the news is saying. So if you can provide the landlord some insight into what's going on specifically with you and what you have to pay, that goes a long way to alleviating their anxiety. And that makes you a person that's much easier to work with than other people. So when we come to a point where the eviction moratorium is lifted and people are behind, I'm probably going to file eviction paperwork on the people who didn't communicate first, just because they're harder to work with. And I'm not likely to file eviction paperwork on everyone at once. It's not an efficient use of my time. I don't really want my building to be empty. Because one of the things that landlords have to deal with is there are rules and covenants in the mortgage paperwork that they signed about how much income they need to be making on this property, how occupied the building needs to be on an ongoing basis, and they still have to satisfy those covenants. And that's something that most renters don't really know. So the next step after you know what your situation is and you're going in to talk to your landlord is, even if you can't pay all of it, something is better than nothing. Because again, it shows that you're someone that's actually easier to work with than other people. So those are kind of definitely the two pieces of advice I would give people is, first, figure out what your situation is. Number one, have that conversation with your landlord, and then paying something is better than paying nothing.
Yeah, definitely. I was seeing on the news like months ago, they were showing how people were like packing up and moving out in the middle of the night, and landlords were waking up with no tenants and how things were really looking bleak. But I don't know how true that is, or
There's likely at least some truth to those stories. Is that happening across the board? Most likely not. Because what will happen is you have a signed lease for a number of months. If you're packing up and moving out without negotiating that, then all of that is going to end up is going to end up on your credit in court when it gets to that point. And now you have an eviction, or you have this judgment on your record for not paying rent, and that's going to follow you in the future. So you're better off negotiating something. And if you do have to move out, talk to the landlord about what would be a fair settlement to move out. Some leases actually allow you to pay 2 months rent, and that terminates the lease as of that point in time. So that means there won't be any ongoing repercussions should you decide to pay that 2 months and then just leave. And also remember that there was a deposit that you put down on the apartment, which typically is about 1 month's rent. So if you are looking at a settlement where you're paying 2 months to cancel the lease, you may only have to make 1 month's rent payment and let them keep the deposit, and then you can wash your hands of that and move on. But the point is to have that conversation and get the whole thing resolved prior to leaving, so that you don't have it following you in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice, because you definitely don't want that on your credit report.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So, Justin, what are you passionate about today in your professional life, and how are you incorporating your passions into what you do daily?
So I'm absolutely passionate about real estate and real estate education and teaching people about real estate. And it's kind of interesting. When I first wrote this book, I was really thinking about it just from the renter perspective. But as I went out and networked with people, I started to learn that this information has uses for people in other parts of the financial industry and people who have other perspectives. So now I'm actually working with landlords as consulting clients who are having trouble with their property management company, where their property management company isn't doing the steps that they need to be doing, and helping smaller landlords navigate that negotiation with the property management companies. I'm learning that there's a whole industry of financial coaches out there, people who help individuals with their relationship with money. And that since renting is such a large part of people's budgets, having information on being able to reduce rent and negotiate with landlords and all of that can really help their practice, since so many people are renting. So I've been really just exploring, just through my own curiosity, of these different avenues through which the information that I have can be helpful to people. And it's really been a great journey. And I'm also learning tips and tricks about how to make videos and higher quality videos and that kind of thing, to help get this information out there and to get my message out there.
That's fantastic. I love how that consultant piece has come back around. Like, remember when you went to school for that, and then it was like, oh my God, this is terrible. And now it's like making its way back around. That's just so cool.
Yeah. And it isn't even just for the landlords either. It's also for renters. Because if you think about it, if you're living in an apartment building and you have a problem with your neighbor who's playing their music too loud at 3 a.m. and and you've emailed the landlord, you haven't gotten any response, or how do I approach that neighbor? What steps need to be involved if the landlord's going to evict that person? Like, the average person really has no clue about what's going on and how that actually happens. So I actually also offer consulting advice for renters as well.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people need that. Just so they don't make bad mistakes, because if you don't realize that you can go and negotiate with your landlord and talk about where you're at and what your issues are and why you may not be able to pay rent this month, you might just freak out and just think, oh my God, the best thing for me to do is just leave. I can't, but if you have someone to talk to who can tell you, look, you can do this, you have options, you don't have to do it this way. I think that's very helpful, and it saves people a lot of heartache down the line with doing something like that, putting something like that on their history, their record, and then having to deal with that, through life and cleaning that up. It can't be pretty.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
definitely think it's
absolutely.
great. So this is the Oh Hell No podcast, and I always ask my guests to share an Oh Hell No moment that has taught them something or changed their perspective on something in life. So I want you to share an Oh Hell No moment with us, a moment in your life where you stopped and thought, oh, hell no. That this can't be happening, or this is great. I can't believe I got this opportunity, or whatever it was that changed something, major for you in your life.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to an experience I had, and this was at the same apartment building where the flood happened.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also, strange enough, water related, but not flood related. So we had a period of months where we were getting just really high water bills, just crazy high water bills. And we found out that the supply line that brings water to the building was leaking underneath the parking lot. So I called my plumbing vendor and I told him what the problem was. And he said, okay, so that will cost about $5,300 to fix. I asked him, well, why so much? And he said, well, it's $5,000 to dig and $350 to repair the pipe. And that's when I had my oh hell no moment. Like, I can go get a jackhammer and I can get a shovel and I can dig, and I don't need to pay you $5,000 for that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's, and I do actually have a picture of me on a jackhammer breaking through the parking lot to get down to this pipe. And when he was describing the prices to me, I had that moment. I didn't realize that the pipe was 2 feet down. Well, actually, the pipe was 3 feet down, which was a foot further than normal. And it was a broken water pipe. So all the dirt around it was mud. And I don't know if you've ever dug through mud, but it's much more difficult than digging through dirt that isn't all wet. So, but I did have the experience of doing that, solving the problem. He came in and fixed the pipe for the $300. And it was one of those moments where I really realized that as a smaller property investor, you still can do repairs. You can fix things that go wrong. I had no clue that this pipe was going to be one of the problems that I faced when we bought this building, but you can overcome the problems that the property presents or that the situation presents. Because what I tell first-time investors all the time is that you are bringing to the situation all of your prior experience, everything you learned on your job, everything you learned from school, all of that is coming with you into this investment situation. And your ability to discern what the problems are, figure out solutions, and implement them, all of that is going to be useful for you going forward in this investment. And that experience really brought that home to me.
I love that. That's a great experience. Sometimes we do have to get dirty and just do it ourselves, especially when you're doing an entrepreneur type of work. It just makes sense financially for you. So I love that you shared that story.
Yeah, because renting that jackhammer, $36. A pretty good investment.
Right. Oh my gosh. They are terrible. Wow. All right. Well, tell everyone where they can buy your book. Is The Rental Secret out yet?
Yes, the book is out. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the usual suspects out there. They can also go to rentalsecrets.net and get more information about me and the book. And also, if they go to rentalsecrets.net/free, they can get a copy of my ebook, my short ebook, Apartment Search Secrets, which shows people how to find a new apartment stress-free.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Justin. I really appreciate you and all the information that you shared with the listeners today.
No, thanks, Keisha. I had a great time. People just need to remember to say, when they find craziness, just say, oh, hell no.
That's right. Oh, man.
It takes a lot to turn an idea into a business. Yahoo Small Business has everything you need to start and grow your business. Get online for free. Visit www.yahoosmallbusiness.com. Out with the old and in with the new. Start your new year with Yahoo Small Business, with everything you need to start and grow your business. Find a domain, get a business email, and create a new professional website. Have a business idea and don't know where to start? Visit www.yahoosmallbusiness.com.